So it is good to be here with you. It's one of my most beloved spiritual communities, and it's really great to be here. Also, the weather's really nice. It was about 40 degrees and drizzly when I left Boston yesterday morning, so this is a nice change. So I live in a very interesting part of the country now, in a region that considers itself pretty accurately the birthplace of American democracy. And it's also where people like William Ellery Channing and Ralph Waldo Emerson and Theodore Parker and people like that helped shape Unitarian Universalism in churches like the one that I attend, which was founded as Puritan in 1630. It's not Puritan anymore. But as you know, I think, probably, we are living in a uniquely troubled time. And as you might imagine, a lot of my New England spiritual friends have asked me during the past few months about how to navigate this era without freaking out, burning out, or just giving out. And I'm sure some of you have given some thought to this too. And if I'm honest, I don't know. I mean that on different levels, though. I don't know a magic formula that's going to make everything okay, or that's going to make you feel okay about everything not being okay. And I also mean that it's okay to not know. It's okay to not know for sure what to do. And in fact, not knowing in the spiritual sense, in the intimate sense, is a good skill to cultivate. So that reading Kevin did, the conversation between Dizang and Fa Yang, is the basis of a core teaching for many Buddhist teachers. It's one of the three guiding principles of Zen Peacemakers, which is an interfaith organization that focuses on spirituality as a basis for social action. And I've worked with them a bit in the past. So no, I don't know any magical formulas, but I've been leaning on these guiding practices to help me focus constructively on what I can do, while at the same time not going too far into the darkness myself whenever I read the news. I'm having a little pulpit malfunction. Bear with me a second while I fix this. So this teaching, not knowing is a koan. Not knowing is most intimate is a koan. Some of you have probably heard of koans, these little problems and puzzles that don't make much sense in the usual logical way, like 2025, for example. But they can help you awaken. Things like, you've heard the sound of two hands clapping. What's the sound of one hand? The important thing about a koan is not the answer. It's about awakening to it. And you start that process by not knowing. And then you let go of your usual ways of knowing so that you can see directly and deeply. And that's what we mean by intimate. So here's a related story. This one's a little bit more straightforward. A swordsman was invited to tea. Now, you've probably heard of these tea services that they do in Japan. This custom started at about the 9th century and is rooted in Zen practice. And in these tea services, everything is ritualized. Every move, every word, everything is done in a certain, very specific way. And so, to drink tea, you have to know what you're doing. Well, this swordsman had been invited to do this, and he had no idea what to do, had no experience with it, and he didn't want to be embarrassed. And so he decided he would go to a tea master for instruction. Well, this was kind of an arrogant guy. He was very hung up on his status as an important swordsman. And tea houses were constructed with doorways that were kind of low. So you had to bow coming in, and he didn't like that. He held high rank, and he didn't go around bowing. And so he was already annoyed by the time he got in the room. And so he yelled for the tea master, "Come out at once." So this quiet old monk comes out and asks him what he wants. And he says, "I need to know about tea, and I need to know right now. Teach me." Master calmly looks him up and down and says, "No, I can't teach you anything. Go away. I don't have time to mess with you." Well, this infuriated this swordsman. He demanded the master serve him tea immediately or he would kill him. And these samurais, they could do that. They had that sort of permission. Well, the master says, okay, fine, settle down, have a seat. And so they sit down at the table, and the tea master very deliberately, very mindfully makes tea. And he puts the cup down in front of the swordsman, and he starts to pour. And he pours until the cup is full. And then he pours until the cup overflows and is almost into the swordsman's lap. Well, the man jumps up, grabs his sword and says, "What do you think you're doing? How dare you try to scald me?" The master says, "You're like that cup. You're too full of your own ideas, your own self-importance. There's no room for anything else. Before you can develop any wisdom, you have to empty out the cup. Otherwise, we'll just make a big mess." The swordsman got it. He put his sword away, and he sat down and opened up to learning about tea. Not knowing as a spiritual practice is a matter of first letting go of your fixed ideas. That means that your preconceptions and prejudgments about yourself and other people and the world in which we live. In daily life, it means we let down our walls. We take away our filters. We really open our eyes to the present moment. That can be uncomfortable sometimes because we might be required to let go of identities that we've held on to very fast for a long time. But being comfortable with our discomfort is an important part of the process. Paradoxically, not knowing isn't ignorance. It's the first step toward wisdom. For me personally, I find it often leads to gratitude, because looking beyond the filters of my own preconceptions can reveal to me how supported I am by the world I'm in. So the first time I went to a Zen center for a retreat, we sat for 25 minutes, meditation, there's a bell, everybody stands up, so I stood up, and everyone turns around and faced their cushion or chair, so I turned around and faced my cushion. And then everyone gashoed. They put their hands together and bowed like this. They bowed to their cushion. I thought, well, that's weird, bowing to a cushion, bowing to an inanimate object like that. Why would you do that? But I did it anyway because, I didn't want to stand out as the strange guy who wouldn't do the strange thing. And I'd like to say that I understood why, but I didn't. I didn't know to not know yet. I got it a few months later. I was out walking my dog. It was late fall. It was a beautiful, crisp morning by Florida standards. My view of what constitutes a crisp morning is a little bit different these days. But anyway, I decided while I was walking the dog that I would practice using my attention a little differently. And the first thing I noticed was this hooded sweatshirt that I had on. And it provided just the right amount of warmth for that morning. And as I noticed this, I realized someone had grown that cotton that sweatshirt was made out of. And someone else had made it into fabric, designed the garment, cut it, assembled it, shipped it, sold it. All those things had to be in place before I could walk the dog in comfort that morning. And so I took a moment to inwardly acknowledge that hoodie and the people and plants that made it available to me. Well, we lived on the edge of the land, and I noticed that the road that we were on had been recently repaved. I noticed this because the last time I'd walked on it, I had to navigate the potholes and everything, and suddenly it's smooth. And so I felt grateful to not have to stumble around these potholes that morning. And I inwardly thanked the road crew. That road was originally built in the 19th century to get people from the steamboat dock on the St. Johns River into town. And so this new asphalt sat atop several layers that began with the roadbed of shell that had been excavated from the mounds along the river. These mounds had been made by generations after generation of pre-Columbian people who ate the freshwater shellfish out of the river. So construction of this road really began thousands of years ago with the lives of snails and mussels and the labor of many people. And so when I took into account the dog's leash and my shoes and the traffic signs and all that stuff, I realized that I had thousands of people and other beings to thank for my ability to walk the dog that morning. And so I inwardly bowed to all of those things that I had previously thought were inanimate objects. When we let go of our knowing, we become more capable of bearing witness to the joys and sufferings that we encounter in the world. That's the second tenet of Zen peacemakers. It includes seeing the situation with all its relevant factors, including our own tendency to attach to things, to judge things, to reject things. Bearing witness helps us to understand others. It also helps us understand ourselves better. That leads to compassion, because we encounter others independent of our preconceptions and judgments. We see that they experience life as we do. I give you a personal example of that. So one of my teachers, Koyo Kabose, had given us a practice to do throughout the day as we went around about our business. And so whenever I did something to make something flow, turn on a light switch or turn on a water faucet, something like that, I was tagasho. Well, one day I stopped for gas, and as I pulled up to the gas tank, another car pulls up on the other side of the pumps, and I get out, I'm doing the credit card thing and all of that stuff. And the other driver gets out, and he goes inside to pay. And he's got this hairstyle that's kind of makes a statement. And he's shirtless. And he leaves his car door open, and his music playing, if you could call it that, loud enough to shake the ground that I'm standing on. And you know, I have opinions about all of these things. And so while he's inside, I'm having this inner rant, and then I flip the switch to pump the gas, and I think, oh, hold on a minute. Gas is going to flow. I have to gasho. Well, that moment of awareness instantly reminded me that I was connected to the world. Gas flowed out of my car because of others' efforts, and I was benefiting from that. That gasho is really a physical embodiment of the recognition of oneness. And I recognize something else too. When I was that other driver's age, I had a hairstyle that a lot of people didn't like. And I dressed in a way that shocked or even offended some people. And I liked my music loud. In fact, I still do. And I'm sure I have annoyed other people with it. And so along with that gasho, I bore witness to my own judgmentalism. And I bore witness to the humanity that I shared with that other driver. When we see others as we see ourselves, we can more clearly see their suffering for what it is. People don't usually try to be difficult or annoying. They want to deal with stresses and difficulties, and sometimes they're just not very skillful about how they go about it. And the same with us. So with practice, we can recognize their suffering as suffering, even if they're causing us pain. In today's context, I think it can help us see two things more clearly. The role that we play in creating our own discomfort, and the discomfort others experience that perhaps hasn't touched us yet. You're probably familiar with a famous quote from a sermon by Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Niemöller had been generally aligned with right-wing ideas previously. And then he started bearing witness to what was going on, and he spoke out against it. So my experience with Unitarian Universalists is that you're probably aware of what's going on, and you're probably speaking out. In my case, I'm also do a lot of bearing witness to the anger that arises in my own mind. Anger and hatred don't accomplish anything. They just wear down my mind. So I try to drop that pretty quickly and turn to the third tenet, which is taking action. Action that arises from not knowing and bearing witness embodies the intention that whatever action is taken serves everyone involved. That includes ourselves and our friends and our loved ones and our spiritual communities. But we take into account what's helpful to everyone, even the people who are responsible for what we perceived as wrongs and injustices. Since taking action in this way is informed by wisdom and compassion, it can lead to transformation, sometimes dramatically so. So Zen Peacemakers does this thing they call a bearing witness retreat. They do them at places like Auschwitz and the Black Hills, the streets of New York, places like that. And I helped them organize one. They decided one year while I was chaplain that they wanted to do one that was organized as a plunge into race in America. And at the time, travel was still pretty limited and all of that because of the pandemic. And so they were going to hold it virtually. And so I was able to get the school to kind of help with this. At the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, there's a huge display of soil in glass mason jars. And the soil was collected from sites where racial lynchings occurred. And there's a Daytona Beach organization that has been working with the museum there to document such sites in that part of Florida and then send them out to Alabama. And so I suggested that we should include one of their soil collection ceremonies in this virtual retreat. So I'll tell you the story about this. In 1939, a black man named Lee Snell, a World War I veteran and taxi driver, had been involved in an auto accident that caused the death of a white boy. And sometime after his arrest, a constable was transporting Snell to the county courthouse 25 miles away in DeLand to be held for trial. Well, two relatives of the boy stopped the police car. Constable didn't put up any resistance. He just pulled over, and Mr. Snell got out, and they shot him. So here we were more than 80 years later, a small group of us assembling with shovels and a big wash tub at the side of a 2-lane road that still runs through the pine woods out there, and we filled that tub with Florida sugar sand. And the next day, they held the ceremony with prayers and songs and testimonies inside a conference room that wasn't too far away. And we live streamed it to the Zen Peacemakers retreat, along with hundreds of other people from the local community and others that joined us. So among the speakers at the ceremony was the local sheriff. And he had been there listening to the talks and hearing from people whose families and neighbors had been impacted by racial violence. And so he got up for his time to speak, and he started reading what was obviously a prepared statement, probably written by somebody in the PR office, completely forgettable. Then he took off his reading glasses, and he looked out at us, and he took a breath, and he said, "Law enforcement failed Mr. Snell that day, and it failed the community." And he went on. He said, "I have to apologize for what happened in my profession back then, but more important, we have to look at one another as human beings and ask, as human beings, how can we possibly allow another human being to be treated this way?" And it's hard to put into words how significant that was, that this Florida sheriff opened up like that in that place. And after all those speeches, everybody lined up and took turns using little garden trowels to scoop soil out of the tub and put it into glass jars to be sent to the museum in Montgomery. And the sheriff was one of the first people to get in line to do that. Often, after not knowing and bearing witness, we don't know what action is appropriate. It might be a small thing. It might be a big thing. It might be nothing. It might be standing by the road with a sign. It might be a ceremonial gesture that opens us up to a bigger reality. It might be done in a community like this one that's committed to social justice. So before I close, I want to invite you into a place of not knowing. Don't do it yet, but in a minute, I'm going to ask you to stand. You can do it internally if you're uncomfortable doing it physically. And then I'm going to invite you to turn to your seat in Gasho. And as you do that, see if you can let go of your ideas about what it means to bow and what it means to bow to a chair. See if you can bow to the support that that seat and that this place has given your spiritual life. Gasho to the people who have shared your practice with you, to the sorrows and joys that have been shared in this place, and the stream of spiritual practice that has brought you to this moment, and to whatever else arises for you as you bear witness today. So please rise in body or spirit as you're willing and able. Gasho to your seat. Thank you so much for your attention. You can be seated.